and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. And this is the second full show of the year. I hope that your new year is going well. I guess we can't really say at the end of January, we have to kind of stop saying Happy New Year, but we're really glad to be back. We're starting our second year. Amy and I love doing this podcast. We did a couple of shows, I think in November and December, that got just a tremendous amount of downloads. So we are, we're really excited to be back for another year. Amy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I know I was so excited, the download numbers and we got some new reviews too. So thank you to everybody that's taken the time to post a review as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, we love reviews. So wherever you listen to podcasts, please leave us a review. We love it. And we love your show ideas. So you can always reach out to us at info@amarketingexpert.com. And that information is also in the show notes. The paperback book from Book to Bestseller is out. Very excited that that's out. A lot of people were waiting on the paperback edition of that book. So I'm really stoked that that's out. And, so the first show coming back, we sort of came in hot, I would say, in 2022 with the first show talking about being a profitable author. And we wanted to intentionally set January up for you to be successful. That kind of sets the stage for the entire year. This show, How to Reverse Engineer Your Success, is really, it may feel a little woo-woo. Like when I send it to Amy, so depending on who designs the shows or who outlines the shows, we send the shows to each other to sort of create a script so that we stay on track, because if you've listened to us for a while, you know that we do get off track very easily. I sent this to her and I'm like, this feels a little woo-woo, because we normally don't go into this kind of realm. If I can use that word here. But it felt really appropriate, because I think that when it comes to goal setting, there are just some missing pieces that we haven't addressed yet. So give us a little bit of wiggle room with this. This is going to be prescriptive, certainly, but a little less maybe tactile than what our shows normally are. And I want to start off this show by asking, how productive did you feel yesterday? Because one of the things that we know, and that I know from pitching New Year's topics, is that by week 3 in January, we typically drop our New Year's resolutions, right? So we start off, as I said earlier, we kind of hit January 1, maybe hot out of the gate, right? We come into January hot and we want to do all the things, and we have all these goals, we have all this stuff. But by week 3, statistically, we know that people their New Year's resolutions kind of fade and they go back to old habits. And I like to start off by asking how productive you felt yesterday, because it does set the stage for this discussion. And if you're like most of us, maybe you felt sort of productive, but you wish you could have done more. And, that's a reality, but, maybe the reality is that you could have done more, but maybe you also aren't being realistic about where you're wanting to go. And that's really sort of the heart and soul of this conversation today. Because we've talked a lot about goal setting and gratitude. That was actually one of our... Siri, did you hear Siri? Siri wants to join in on the conversation. My watch just randomly started talking to me. It's been doing that all week. But we talked about goal setting, and we did a podcast on gratitude, which was a very, very heavily downloaded podcast. And gratitude in terms of succeeding as an author. But this podcast is really, as I said earlier, it's less granular. It's broader in scope, and it's also really about the mindset of success. And I'm not talking about affirmations, though I love those. I mean being mindful about absolutely everything that builds towards your success as an author. And it's really starting with the end in mind. So starting with where your end goal is. Amy, have you ever tried that, starting with the end in mind? Maybe when crafting with your kids, or where you have a picture of the goal you're trying to work towards, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, absolutely. I do everything with an end result. in mind because I feel like now I'm at a support group. I am not a spontaneous person.
Awesome.
And mostly because I try to be self-aware enough to know that I am much more stable and calm and easier to be around when I don't feel like I'm being thrown for a loop and I'm having a bunch of things coming at me from different angles. So I plan out everything in my head. Penny also knows I am the first one to raise my hand if we need to come up with a new process or a new way to figure out how to get something done, because that's just how my brain works. But that's because I also 100% realize that you kind of have to play an active role in getting to that end result. And that's why I enjoy that step-by-step process so much, because you're outlining that active role in each step that has to be taken in order to get where you want to go. And I think a really great example that we see a lot of, where that active role comes in and kind of the misperceptions with that is that we still get a lot of authors that come to us and right out of the gate, they're very honest and say, like, I want a movie deal. Like, that's my goal. Like, what can you guys do to get me there? And we think that's exciting, but literally no movie in the history of time happens strictly because the story was good.
Right.
There's so much more involved in that. And so those kind of goals are literally years in the making. And if you check out mentally and just kind of focus only on the goals and only on writing your acceptance speech, it's really hard to ensure anything comes to fruition. You're kind of wasting your time. You're missing those steps.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because hope is not a marketing plan. And it's interesting because I talk to authors all the time. I talked to somebody in particular last week, and his comment to me was, I said, so why are you hiring a marketing and publicity firm, which is a question that I often lead with. And he said, I want to sell thousands and thousands of books. And I said, so what's so I asked him, because genuinely, because I don't know, sometimes when people say that to me, like, I don't know, they might have a structure in place already to do, the majority of those sales. Maybe they have a business, they have a mailing list, they have very active social media. And I asked him, I said, so what have you got going on? Like, give me some backstory to that, statement. And basically, first book, nothing going on, no website, no nothing. And that's his end goal. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think that is an example of having the end in mind, right? Okay, so that's your end goal. But then to the point of, the title of this podcast, that end goal does require some reverse engineering. And another example of this, working with an end goal with an end in mind is cooking, right? So, while whatever you're making, and this happens to me very often, may not look like the picture on the recipe, right? Pictures of the end product are much more helpful when it comes to recipes. And this is part of the reason why, and Amy, don't hang up on me because I know we're getting like super woo-woo. Like, this is part of the reason why, like, vision boards, like people like recommend vision boards, like pictures of, where you want to be, right? And creating your 5-year goal. If 5 years feels too long, 3 years works, right? Why are you laughing at me?
No, I'm just thinking, like, if 5 years feels a little heavy right now, go with 3. It's fine.
Right. 5 years, right? Well, and because, see, the other reason I used to say when I would give a talk similar to this at writers' conferences, I used to say, create a 1-year goal. And then 2020 happened, right? Yeah. And what we know now is that a goal that's a year out is not necessarily unattainable at all, but a lot can happen. A lot of crazy can happen in a year. So a 3-year goal gives you a little bit of like wiggle room where you don't feel like, on December 31st, like, oh, great, there's my 1-year goal. And, hopefully the pandemic will never happen again. But, like in 2020, the pandemic happened, everything got sidelined. And what am I going to do? So, when I say to create a goal, I mean, not just create. So back to this author who wants to sell thousands of books, right? What I really want to encourage you to do is describe your day What is your day like as an author who sells thousands and thousands of books, or to Amy's example, an author who has a movie deal? What does your day look like, and describe it in the utmost detail?
Right. And you mean leading up to, right? Not drinking your cocktail by the pool after you've sold all your books.
Well, I think that's a great example. And here's actually, folks, I just want to point this out. This is a great example of why Amy and I work so well together, because I come up with this dreamy, like, okay, write your day in the utmost detail. And Amy's like, wait, which day is that? What day are we talking about? Well, no, we're talking about the day that you're walking down the red carpet after your book is a movie, or are we talking, you know what I mean?
Right. And I think to your point, Penny, though, but that is why this process can get so distracting, because that version is a lot more fun, right? But you have to make room for the roller coaster, because the reality is if you get derailed every time something doesn't go according to plan, you're not going to get very far. And so much of being a successful author depends on also what comes back to you. So yes, you have to write great books and produce great covers and get in front of the right people. But at the end of the day, you still only have so much control over what comes back to you. So these, like you said, plan out a day at a time, plan out a year at a time, 3 years, if you can pull that out. But just keep in mind, we're not saying you have to entirely control the narrative, kind of like my pun there, but you have to create a path at least that you can come back to, that you can come back to when you do kind of get derailed or sidetracked again.
Right, exactly. And, when I talk about the perfect day, when I talk about your perfect work day, when you are that wildly successful author, yes, that could include a Cosmo by the pool, right? But it probably also includes a very structured day. So your day is probably clearly outlined. Like maybe you get up first thing in the morning and you're writing pages for your next book, because you're always moving towards that next book. Maybe you're spending some time on your newsletter. Maybe you are spending time on your social media, connecting with fans. There are a lot of different things that go into even when you are a successful author, because most of the time they aren't. Yes, they're taking time to enjoy their success, but they're not taking their foot off the gas, right? And I think that part of this work, so the reverse engineering part, is also about letting it go. We talked about this actually in the last podcast, in the Profitable Author podcast. A lot. So, and when I talk about letting it go, a lot of authors I talk to get upset about reviews. Like, I get it, but it happened and you have to move on. Maybe you made a bad decision, right? When it came to a publisher, it happens. I would by no means mean to belittle that. But what I mean is let it go and keep focusing your mind on what moves your success forward, right? Because when you focus on the right things that align with a successful author, where you want to be in 3 to 5 years, what we're doing here is we're trying to encourage you to change your behavior. And I'm sure everybody listening is perfect. You're perfect as you are, but it is helpful when you move beyond the things that you can't change. So like that bad review, like that bad publisher. And one of the reasons I use that as an example is because sometimes I get on the phone with authors and really that's all they want to talk about. That's all they want to talk about. They want to talk about the reviewers who didn't like their book, or the reader who gave them a 1-star review. And are they trying to sabotage my success? And this publisher hated me. And yes, a poorly performing publisher can absolutely impact your success. So again, not to belittle that, but at some point you do have to move on, because you need to, again, align your mind with where you want to be in that, that 3 to 5 year, or that 3 or 5 year that goals. And granted, it doesn't happen overnight, but it absolutely can happen.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And I think confidence and ownership are also really important in this, because the less confident you feel either in your writing or in your marketing or even in your ability to gain access to your Amazon or Goodreads account. And I can tell you all very honestly, these are real things we see all the time with clients that we deal with, the kind of things that throw you for a loop. The more out of control you feel, and it's hard to recognize the wins along the way when you're feeling less than. So to Penny's point about focusing on the successful version of you versus whatever version of you happened in the past, even if it was just yesterday, like you can't go back and fix that. So the simplest ways to gain confidence is by doing, by taking ownership, by educating yourself along the way. I know, Penny, you're a big proponent of education. And like you said, keeping your mind focused on the successful version of you that is going into that next day.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you get caught in this spiral, right? The spiral of, I don't know how to use Amazon ads. I don't know how to use Goodreads. I don't understand the BookBub platform, whatever that is. You have to refocus your mind and remember and think about that person 3 years from now who is wildly successful. What are they doing? And, to Amy's point, they're probably starting with confidence, taking ownership, and educating. Educating is such a big deal. And it's also a part of this is knowing what you can control and what you can't. And then again, really starting to let go of the things that you can't control, which it doesn't actually keep you moving forward. Because, in all of this is your mood or your feeling. And I've actually, and I know I'm pausing to give a lot of examples here, but I think it's worth mentioning that over the 20 plus years that I've been in business, I've seen authors, wildly successful authors. I remember one author from a number of years ago, and this author was unbelievably good, just an unbelievably talented writer. And this particular author was constantly undermining their success with their mood and focusing on the things that they weren't getting and that they weren't achieving, as opposed to focusing on, as Amy pointed out, focusing on the things that you were getting. And the mood or feeling is so important. Aligning yourself with people who share your feeling, who inspire you, and who want to help you in your journey. And I will tell you that when I first started this business, I don't share this often, but I absolutely did that. So I had people, I was actually dating somebody, Penny's dating stories. Oh, good Lord, pull up a chair. But I was actually dating somebody who I went out to dinner, and I had just started the business. And he said to me, so Penny, when are you going to get a real job? And I never went out on a second date because I really believe that you have to surround yourself. And so if you're in a writer's group and they're very negative, or they're all spending time talking about what they don't have, maybe you've made friends, and I'm not necessarily encouraging you just to drop everybody because they're not supporting you. That's not really what this is about. But you do want to surround yourself with people who are going to, share your feeling, who inspire you, people you admire, right? They talk about this in business a lot. Find somebody that you admire. You don't necessarily have to become their BFF and braid each other's hair, but, it is really about, aligning yourself with people who share your attitude. And there are a lot of books that talk about vision boards. I mentioned vision boards earlier, long-term visualization, all of which I absolutely love. And Amy knows this. I'm a huge fan of all this stuff. But you have to find what works for you, right? Specifically. So maybe writing your day down in finite detail, so going back to your perfect day when you're a successful author, writing it out in finite detail so you can feel what that day feels like, right? And kind of spend a little bit of time to sit with this. So, find whatever is the least busy day for you in the week. Maybe it's a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon or something where you can spend some time and really kind of feel and get excited about what this day looks like. And for others, vision boards are really helpful. I do a little bit of a combination. I do this. Absolutely. I've done this for 20 plus years that I've had this business in different ways. I mean, sometimes I do a vision board. Sometimes I get lazy with my vision board and I don't always update it with pictures, but I'm always journaling or writing or something. And I remember, like, I even used to take my fiction books and I would white out, I'd take the New York Times best-selling list actually out of the newspaper. I would cut it out. I would white out the top spot and I type, and this now obviously goes back a few years with the typewriter, I would type my book title in to the number one spot. Now, part of the reason why this matters is because Amy's laughing. Can you hear her laughing, people? She's laughing. It's a goofy thing, right? I'm full on in this podcast, like opening the kimono. I'm not necessarily suggesting, that you tell all the people all the things like that you did this, but whatever makes you feel better, whatever keeps you on track, because your brain is like a toddler. So the more direction you can give it, the better. And we know this because, if we have something like, let's say something bad happened to you that day, relative to you got a bad review on the book. I know authors who have told me, like, sometimes they sit up at night, they wake up in the middle of the night, they think about this review, and then their brain, catastrophizes, and you're just like, blah, blah, down the road. I'm never going to sell books. Everybody's going to hate me, blah, blah, blah. So the more direction that you can give your brain, the better. An undirected brain will literally just scattershot all day, right? You'll check social media without ever really getting anywhere, and you'll never really move. You'll never keep moving the ball forward in terms of your goals.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, to me, again, it all comes back to taking ownership, like you said, Penny, we talked about this a lot in our goals episode. So these complement each other really well. And you can waste a lot of time getting bogged down by what you're not doing or by what you should be doing, but at the end of the day, nothing's really going to happen without follow through. So as you said, commit to it, find something that works for you, and focus on getting that vision and then filling in those actionable steps as part of it. Get your vision board going, whatever version works for you. And then, like you said, reverse engineer it. Start figuring out what steps you're going to take on the way to get there and focus on those individual things.
Right. Exactly. And I think that, again, one of the things that this does is it does help to shift everything. So you start to see where to invest your time. So even if your quote unquote ideal day changes throughout 2022, so you add some modifications to it, you do this, what creating this does is it helps to kind of anchor your brain. It shows you where you need to invest your time. So, if your 3-year goal is to write, let's say 3 more books, okay, then what you need to do on most mornings or afternoons, whatever your ideal writing time is, or evenings or nights, whatever, where you need to be spending your, whether you need to be spending your week. One of the other things that I wanted to mention, again, focusing your brain, keeping that image of your end goal in mind, and don't write this down and just forget about it, right? So in many books, many very, very well done books out there on goal setting talk about revisiting it daily. I will be honest with you, I don't often revisit it daily, but definitely once a month, like I'll come back to, the vision board or whatever version that I have, or my long-term goals. But I do daily affirmations in writing. So not typed. There's a lot of studies about, how actually handwriting goals and gratitude lists and visions has a much more stickier impact. So I write every single day. I have my affirmations, my goals. And again, full kimono's fully open. Like, this is stuff that and I don't spend a lot of time on it, like maybe 5 or 10 minutes in the morning with a cup of coffee, just to sort of kick off the day. And I don't obsess about it through the day. Once it's done, I put it away and I sort of forget about it, but it does help to it keeps the mind focused.
I think that's so smart and actually very admirable because, for people, truly though, because you tell me a lot about how you set aside time to focus on to compartmentalize in a way, things that you need to give attention to, and you need to kind of set aside that time. And I think that's fabulous. But for the small percentage of you listening that are kind of like me, that are maybe breaking out into a cold sweat, imagining finding 5 or 10 more minutes of like Zen silence to fit that in. That's also okay. I guess I want to give permission that there's not exactly one right way to do this. I'll be honest, if someone gifted me a planner, I'd kind of look at that as an act of violence. Like I am not a planner person. But I realize I'm in the minority, but I have figured out what helps me stay focused. And I do know my process for getting things done, and it works. So, I stick to that and I follow that process. And so we're trying to help bring light to this like vicious cycle of bouncing around that creates this sense of chaos that distracts you from being productive and getting those wins, and finally seeing things that are on that vision board or that you've written down for yourself, those affirmations actually coming true, and getting to go, oh my gosh, look, I did that. I actually did that.
Yeah. I think that's really, at the end of the day, whatever, and Amy, I'm glad that you talked, I thought that line about active violence with the planner was just hilarious. But it's a really good example that not all of the things that we're suggesting here, you've got to find your own rhythm, because me gifting Amy a planner would, just because I think it's helpful for her isn't going to really benefit her. I mean, she might use it, as a coaster or something, right? Like it's just not, so you have to really find, what works for you. I adore planners. Like at the end of the year, like I obsess over my next year plan. Like I have to find the right one. I love planners, love them. I've been known sometimes to buy like 2 of them, and then I only use one, which is really silly. But
Penny, can I tell you, the other day I talked to somebody that still keeps all of their stuff in a date book.
Oh my gosh, no.
Okay. So I was wondering is that going too far? Because I was shocked. I am, again, a date book thing is like a planner on steroids for me, like getting that specific. But they're like, oh yeah, let me add it to my date book. And I was like, wait, what is happening?
Yeah.
And they save all of them. They have ways to go back and see what happened in their life. And I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm a few decades too late to starting that party. But I was like, well, that sounds cool though.
I'll tell you something. It is interesting though, because I got a planner that is actually it has a short little space for like a daily entry. And so like, I will at the end of the day, or sometimes the beginning of the next day, I'll write what happened that day before, and it's an interesting thing. Like, it's interesting because you remember details, and I can go back and look at stuff. Not that, that I need to go back and think, oh, what was I doing in March? Like that's not kind of what that's about. But it's interesting if you're using something like that to sort of track your performance or what you've done, because not every day is going to feel as productive. Stuff throws you for a loop. Your book designer is like out sick or whatever and can't meet your deadline. Stuff is going to happen. But one of the reasons that the planner idea that I like is because cumulatively you look and you think, oh, I really was, last week was a very productive week. This week, I got sort of thrown for a loop. All of this is designed to really help you keep this mindset, which is so important to success. And you can throw all the money at the world at book marketing, but if you are, if you don't do anything to help keep the train moving, if you don't do anything yourself, and you're not approaching this really with the right attitude, not trying to be Pollyanna, but it like I talked about that author who just was phenomenally talented. And I think that if this person would have kept writing, we would have seen at least one, maybe 2 movies from these books, because they were just that good. So the difference between success and not being successful sometimes is just the right mindset. and, staying positive. So I hope this has been helpful. I know this was a little bit of a divergent from, what we normally talk about, but Amy was kind enough to go along with my crazy idea about reverse engineering your success. We'd love your feedback on the show and any other show. We love your show ideas, obviously, all the time. You're welcome to write us on your show ideas, feedback on the show, and a review. We'd love a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.